Today's episode is proudly sponsored by the Rising Tide Mastermind. The Rising Tide Mastermind is one of my favorite things that I look forward to each and every week because I get to see people that have my best interest in mind. I know this because I have their best interest in mind. And when you get people together in a room like that, you can just imagine how people want to help other people. If this sounds like something you want to learn more about, go to scalinguph2o.com/mastermind. Welcome to Scaling Up H2O, the podcast where we scale up on knowledge so we don't scale up our systems. My name is Trace Blackmore, the host of the most awesome water treatment podcast out there, Scaling Up H2O. Thanks for being a member of the Scaling Up Nation. And Nation, if this is not on your calendar, this is something that you need to put on your calendar. And I think every holiday where we celebrate what it is that we do or what we do it with, I mean water, you need to celebrate it. Our job can be kind of hard sometimes, and we need opportunities to just take a step back and celebrate with each other. And you know you are celebrating with other members of the Scaling Up Nation. So if this is not on your calendar, go ahead and mark your calendar for World Water Day. That is March 22nd. That is coming up very soon. And we get to celebrate World Water Day together. World Water Day is always held on March 22nd, and it's all about accelerating change to solve the world water crisis. And something we do each and every year is we celebrate World Vision's Global 6K. And I say celebrate, that's probably not the right word, but we do observe on May 18th, we all do a global 6K together. I'm going to do a show when we talk about World Water Day on the global 6K. But until then, if you want more information, you can go to scalinguph2o.com/6K. And it's all about how do we bring water to communities so they can enhance the communities instead of walking 6 kilometers to go get water. So we're going to have more information in an upcoming episode around that. But in the meantime, go ahead and put 2 dates on your calendar. That's March 22nd for World Water Day and May 18th for the Global 6K. And it's my hope that you join Team Scaling Up, where we can all walk, run, crawl, whatever you want to do, wherever you are this year on May 18th for the Global 6K for water. Also coming up on April 11th, it's our second hang of the year. And I know what you're thinking. Trace, the hang is just a Zoom call. It's just a video conference. And I don't want to go to another video conference. Well, folks, this is the video conference that you want to go to for a couple reasons. One, it's at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. It starts exactly at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, and it ends exactly at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. So it doesn't take a lot of time. It's not one of those calls that you don't know when you're going to get off. You know when you're going to start. You know when you're going to end. And in that hour, it is going to be action-packed. I'm going to let you know a couple things about what's going on in our industry, and then I'm quickly going to get you into a breakout room where you get to meet people in this industry. And folks, this is an invaluable opportunity. Think about who you know in this industry that can solve whatever problem you are currently having or maybe you are having in the future. You can't know enough people. When you get to meet new people, that is a great opportunity. And we don't always have those opportunities present themselves in our day-to-day. So that is what the hang is all about, to bring networking to you right where you are for just 1 short hour. So you will get to meet people that are on the call, on the video conference. I'll give you a few things to talk about, but you will get to know people that will help you with future issues. I have heard so many success stories where people have met somebody, they then had an issue with, say, a water softener, and they met somebody who just knew so much about water softeners. Now, they didn't call them first. They called some other people. Everything they tried would not work. He figured, okay, I met this new guy a month or so ago on this hang call. He said I could call him. That was the whole premise of the hang. Trace told me to call him. I'm going to call him. Well, he called him and he asked him questions that he had never considered before. And because of how he asked the questions, the expert was able to lead him to a solution. It was something he never thought of. It was something that other people never thought of. And it was the right answer. And it fixed it right there. It impressed the customer. He now left out with more knowledge, and he would have never gotten there, at least not as easily, if he did not attend the hang. I'm sure if we had an attorney that would sample this show, they would say I'd have to put a disclaimer. Not all experiences are the same. Some experiences may vary. Your experience may be different from the one described on the Scaling Up H2O podcast. But even so, you are going to meet people that you didn't know before. And folks, it happens so many times. People just like sharing and helping within this industry. Don't you want to know more people in this industry? Sure you do. Go to scalinguph2o.com/hang. I will see you on April 11th at 6 p.m. Eastern, and I will introduce you to everybody that's on that call. Something else coming up is the Pennsylvania Brownfields Conference, and that's March 25th through 27th in State College, Pennsylvania. And this is all about the basics of Pennsylvania's Brownfields program and how to address abandoned and dilapidated buildings and what to do with PFAS and mitigating the problems with abandoned and dilapidated buildings. So if you are in the State College area, you might want to check this conference out. And this is put on by the Engineer Society of Western Pennsylvania. They are the same great folks that put on the International Water Conference. And I just had such a great time at the conference and working with them last year. I can only imagine how great this conference will be. We'll have all that information on our show notes page, as well as the International Trade Fair for Wastewater Technology. That is taking place in Munich, Germany, May 13th through 17th. And then finally, the Association for Professional and Infectious Control and Epidemiology Professionals annual conference is taking place June 3rd through 5th in San Antonio, Texas. I have to say, San Antonio, Texas is a great convention town. They've got that canal walk there. It is just amazing. You can walk all up and down the canal, go through the entire downtown area, and never get into traffic. There's restaurants, there's all sorts of things to do there. If you ever have the opportunity to go to a conference in San Antonio, I would do it just for the Riverwalk system that's there. But of course, you've got this great conference coming up, and we're going to have all the information that you need to know about that conference and many more that I didn't even mention today by going to scalinguph2o.com, and you can go over to our events page. Scaling Up Nation, one of the conferences you may have met our next guest at was the AWT, the Association of Water Technologies Conference in Vancouver. She was a speaker there, and her name is Kalpna Solanki. You're going to love this interview. Here it is, folks. My lab partner today is Kalpna Solanki, President and CEO of the Environmental Operators Certification Program. Kalpna, welcome to the Scaling Up H2O podcast.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
Well, we are excited about having you here, and we've done a couple of episodes about how people should look at social media and making sure that they have a presence and people feel that they know you on social media, because whenever somebody wants to introduce themselves to somebody, probably the first thing they do is go out and look at their social media accounts. You do a fabulous job at that. You are skiing, you are going on trips, and you are talking water every step of the way. I think you need to teach a class on social media.
Thank you. I didn't know I was that great.
Well, maybe I'm just so poor, and that's the reference of that. I've got a great team that makes me look a lot better than I am. I'm curious, what are some of the things that you try to do when you post with social media? What's the message that you're trying to center around?
I think a lot of things are that I post and I talk about on social media, things that are near and dear to me, and there are things that I'm passionate about. So you'll definitely see things related to my work in the water wastewater industry, but you certainly see information related to, say, sleep or diet or exercise, because I think these are really important components in terms of a person's well-being. And so there'll be it's sometimes it can be a little bit out there in terms of, it's like, oh, she's talking about environmental operators today and she's talking about her conference, and then next thing it'll be something about going paddling or going skiing. I mean, it's just all related to water. One's frozen and one isn't, but just very much related to, I mean, this is an industry I'm very passionate about.
I will say I loved your conference postings because you were bringing the entire listening audience or whoever was watching your social media post into those conferences.
We were very fortunate. I mean, we work with a really great team for the AV aspect, and so our goal, it was sort of precipitated by the COVID-19 pandemic and restrictions with regards to gatherings, and so we turned it into a hybrid conference in 2020. And then just subsequent to that, it like people would say, so are you going to have it as a hybrid conference in perpetuity? It's like, the ship has sailed on that. I think we have to. And I've been involved with conferences where they're almost always hybrid now. And very often the online audience is actually larger than the in-person audience. And I think it's that opportunity that we want to give to people to get their education, to get information about the industry. And we focus mainly on water, wastewater, and then leadership as well. We want people to be able to access that information either in person or from wherever they wish to do so. So we had people attending from Kenya, from the Caribbean, from Europe, and just making it accessible as possible, because you know what, we have the technology, so why not?
I love that. Well, before we go any further, let's make sure the Scaling Up Nation gets properly introduced to you. Kalpna, do you mind sharing with the nation a bit about yourself?
Okay, so I've been at the Environmental Operator Certification Program since 2016. I'm very passionate about the work that we do, and I'll tell you a little bit about the work that we do here. We classify water and wastewater facilities, and then we also certify the environmental operators who work there. And in terms of the environmental operators, I think they are some of the most unrecognized and unappreciated people out there. I mean, we turn on our taps and we get drinking water, we flush our toilets, and the waste goes away, and it's all almost like magic. But there are people who make this happen. And the main people who make this happen are our environmental operators. So there's that one part of it. It's like magic that this all just happens and we don't always know. But also the other thing I find is that this career, it's almost like the world's best kept secret. And very few people know about this. And that's one of the things that we're trying to change, because it's a career with lots of opportunities. You can work anywhere in Canada, anywhere in North America, anywhere around the world, because just about everywhere you need people to take care of your drinking water and your wastewater management.
Well, let's explore that a little bit because we are all trying to find the next generation of our workforce, and people are trying to figure out what to do. What's some suggestions that you have to our audience, for our audience, that they should be doing to find that next worker?
Well, one of the things about this career is I should also mention is it is pretty well recession proof. I mean, no matter what the state of the economy is, there will always be a need for environmental operators. Something that I'm really excited about in terms of finding out more about the profession and then finding about options on how to join the profession is we started up a new website, and it's called watergeek.ca. So if you go to watergeek.ca, you'll find out information about, well, what is it that these operators do? So we've got some little short videos because we found out people don't like really long, pedantic videos. So there's short videos, about a minute, minute and a half each, that actually interview operators on their jobs. So it's called our Operators on the Job video series. So that's one aspect in terms of, first of all, who are these people? What do they do? And then there's information at watergeek.ca also on, if you are interested in becoming an operator, how do you become one? So that's one of the projects that we've been involved with and really excited about. We're getting a lot of traffic. And I think part of the reason for really trying to kind of promote this career is because one of our first conferences, so we had our first conference in 2018. And at that conference, there were 300 people in the room. And so I asked everyone to stand up. And then I said, anyone who is not an operator, please sit down. And maybe 5 people sat down. The rest of the people were still standing up. And then I asked the group, I said, any one of you that decided to become an operator when you left high school, remain standing. Everyone else, please sit down. There were 3 people that remained standing. So for me, it just illustrated that component with regards to people don't know about this career. High school students don't know about this career. And this is going back a little bit. Did I know what I wanted to be when I finished high school? I did not. It's been a bit of a circuitous journey. And so we're telling people, hey, maybe you should consider this. And then sometimes you get people saying, well, what if I don't like the job? Well, there's so many different avenues in terms of what you can do. Also, my premise is knowledge is never wasted. And whatever you learn in this program, you can probably apply it elsewhere. And to give you an idea in terms of my dedication to the industry, I encourage my son to go through the program, and he's in the program right now at the BC Institute of Technology, and he just started the program in September.
I was fortunate. My father was in this industry, so I always knew about it. But when it was time to step up and become a member of this industry, I didn't think it was a real job because I always knew about it. My father assured me that it was, and here I am. If there's somebody today that's listening and says, I want to be part of letting the high schoolers know that this is a potential career opportunity for them, what can they do?
I really would recommend having a look at our site. I know that it's pertinent to British Columbia and Yukon, but it does, in terms of operator jobs, environmental operator jobs, they're pretty consistent around North America and internationally. But if you go to watergeek.ca, the nice thing about it is you get to see these videos. You see a video of someone working in water treatment, in water distribution, in wastewater collection, in wastewater treatment. So you get a really good account of who these people are and what their day-to-day jobs entail. This got nothing about me in there at all. It's actually people who are certified environmental operators who are members of the EOCP. And we basically hired a videographer to follow them around and put together these videos.
One of the things your organization puts out is the Operator Digest magazine, which is very well done. Can you tell the Scaling Up Nation a bit about that?
Thank you. So it's a quarterly magazine, and it's been around for a while. I think it was initially, interestingly, I think it was started off probably in the 70s or so, but it was actually called the Scum Line at that time.
Oh my goodness, I'm glad you changed the name.
Yes. And then it would get published sort of intermittently. And when I joined the EOCP, that was one of my goals. It's like, let's really make this into a more professional magazine. Let's have scheduled dates, and hired a graphic designer who I had worked with before. It's also an aspect of my job that I really like in terms of I'm a bit of a geek at heart. And so I get to go visit new facilities and then I write about them. And there are some regular columns. There's always a who's on the move column. That is, I think it's really important because then people get to see, well, I start off as an operator, but these are other opportunities that could be available to me, because these who's on the move is usually focused on an operator who's moved up or moved around and sometimes worked on an international level. And then we also have an operator profile. And that I think is really interesting. I've always found them very interesting to read because it just shows that, we focus on water, wastewater operators, and they acknowledge which individuals have been important in their career journey. But one of the things they always talk about that I find just really heartening is how they always talk about how they love their work. And so I think that's a really good thing for people to read if they're thinking about this as a career option. This is operators in their own words talking about their careers. And then we always focus on plant profile. So that's something that I write about usually. One of our former engineers used to write about it too. And we sort of take turns, but usually lasts a little while because I've been traveling for meetings and conferences and so on. I'll try to fit in a facility close to where I'm going to be staying or visiting, and then go visit that facility. So we've got some amazing work going on with some really state-of-the-art facilities that have been newly commissioned around British Columbia and Yukon.
If there's a listener today that has just heard the acronym EOCP, can you tell us a little bit more about your organization?
So it's an interesting organization, and it really gives credit to the people in the industry from years ago. So the organization was actually formed in 1966 by some wastewater operators who felt that there needed to be some standards with regards to classification of facilities and also training of operators. So they formed this organization before there were any regulations requiring this. So it's a little bit shocking that this organization was formed in 1966. It was the first organization in Canada. And it wasn't until 1993 that there were first regulations related to wastewater treatment. And even more shocking is that there weren't any regulations related to water until 2003. So we're a unique organization in terms of being the first that was formed before there were any regulations, but also very unique in the sense I think we may be one of two only in North America where we work with government, but we're actually not part of government. And because when the regulations came about in 1993 and 2003, the government said, well, there's an organization doing this work in this space. So why don't we just name this organization in the regulations as being responsible for facility classification and operator certification? So we work very closely with government, but we are not part of government.
Something that I find fascinating, and I wish more organizations did it, is you put out a lot of material to help train the people that are going to be making future laws in things that they need to know about the laws that they are making. Why did you decide to do that? And what's your process to actually get that to the people that need to read it?
So I would say one of the ones that I can think about is specifically with regards to backflow prevention. So in that situation, what it is, it's in the public interest that there needs to be better monitoring of this. And this is what really guides us in a lot of the work that we do is what's in the public interest. So we usually have a task force that looks at new certifications. Should we be considering new certifications? What's in the public interest? And usually it starts off with a list of several different potential certifications. And we, as a task force, the task force comprises of staff as well as board directors. And last year, the decision was, you know what, we really need to focus on backflow prevention and cross-connection control because it is in the public interest. There's a risk to the public, and not enough is being done in this area. So one of the other things that we've done some work on is with regards to emergency response related to water, wastewater facilities, because it seems like we're sometimes just flying by the seat of our pants. I'll give you an example of November 2021, when the atmospheric river hit this town of city of Merritt. And what happened there was there's no emergency response teams. It's literally as defined by the seat of our pants. And so the city of Merritt, the chief administrative officer, called up the chief administrative officer in the city of Kamloops and said, send help. Our facilities are flooded. We have no wastewater treatment. Our water distribution system is affected. And the CAO in Kamloops said, well, what do you need? And the fellow from Merritt said, we don't know. Send everything and anything you can spare. And then a couple of other groups provided some assistance as well. And, with climate change and, the severity of extreme weather events and the frequency of extreme weather events, we need to have something in place. So one of our biggest projects was with regards to going out and doing a debrief with the people who are in Merritt, as well as the people in Kelowna who provided support in terms of we can't keep on functioning like this. We need to have emergency response teams. And so that is a proposal that we've made to government that we need to have, and we've identified 7 locations around the province, and each location would have an emergency response team and a trailer outfitted with equipment that is necessary for providing emergency response. So that's been a bit of an uphill battle. It made sense to us. We thought it was a great idea, but government's, of course, going, well, we don't know if we want to spend that kind of money. I don't think it's that exorbitant in terms of the costs involved, but that is something where we actually have a really amazing video that outlines what the problem is, what the solutions are.
Most of our listeners are in the States, and there are lots of, I guess, sister organizations in the States that are doing similar things. If one of our members or one of our listeners is listening and they are members to one of these associations, what advice would you give them to make sure that they are doing the same work that you're doing, getting the right information to the legislators? Because I can't tell you how many things that have been passed that I can think of where the people making the laws had no clue what they were making the laws on. And had a professional been involved, it would have been better for everybody.
I think one of the key things is with the video that we created, I did the voiceover for that. But all the people that we interview are people who are literally boots on the ground, people with expertise. So I think it's really important to make sure that the people with the expertise are actually talking about what the problems are and what the possible solutions are. I think that's a key component. We don't need all of these consultants kind of at the higher level sort of giving information and advice because they're not the ones experiencing this. I mean, we had one operator at one point when he was talking about the wastewater treatment facility, the drain in the wastewater treatment facility was at a lower level than the river. And so he actually stripped down to his undies and got in there. And it's November, it's cold. And basically put in this almost like a ball stop into the floor drain to stop the water coming up. So, I mean, just some of those things. I mean, I don't have experience with that, but he does. And so, really talking to people about what the problems are, what the possible solutions are, I think that's really important to get those people involved because otherwise it's just a theoretical exercise.
That's great advice. You mentioned backflow prevention. And if you're not involved with that, that's probably something that you're required to certify each and every year that you have something. Maybe in some places you don't even have to do that. But I thought we could start the conversation around backflow prevention. What exactly is it and why is it so important?
Well, when you think about backflow, it's basically the reverse flow of undesirable materials into a water system. So you could have water like it's perfectly safe coming from the water treatment facility. But if there's a backflow event, then you've got the potential of chemicals getting in. I'd say chemicals, it could be anything else, getting into the system. That is basically going to be contaminating the drinking water. And there have been many, many, many examples of that. I can give you some examples here, and it's very often as a result of people kind of turning on their taps and kind of noticing, oh, the water is blue. Why is the water blue? Or the water smells terrible. or the water tastes terrible. And really, it's actually quite worrisome that some of these incidents still continue happening. And part of it is because in most jurisdictions, I know in British Columbia and Yukon, there is no legislation saying you have to have backflow prevention devices in place to make sure this doesn't happen. With a lot of, and it's basically almost on a voluntary basis. And some cities have bylaws that say you need to have these systems in place. But in general, the certification and the examination and certification programs are not really that rigid. And what's also more, in a way, almost more important is that these systems are sometimes out there. Because say if a new facility is being constructed, I'll say, well, you need to have a backflow prevention device in place. But then just putting in a device alone is not enough. You've got to make sure that it's tested annually, repaired if necessary. And the testing and repair needs to be done by someone who has the training, who has written the exam, and who is certified in that area. Because it's not something that someone can just walk off the street and take care of properly.
In the municipality that I'm located in, around Atlanta, Georgia, all commercial facilities are required to have backflow prevention devices, but not on residential.
And that is where a lot of the problems occur. Because say, for instance, say if I'm applying, I don't have a perfect lawn, so it's definitely not me, but say if I was applying, say, weed and feed, for instance, and you can get weed and feed, like you get some of those containers where you can just attach your hose to the 4-liter container of pesticide. And then you're spraying that. All of a sudden, there is a pressure drop in the system because, say, someone has a broken water line. So instead of the water going from the municipal system into your container and spraying out onto the lawn, all of a sudden, you're going to have a problem with water being sucked out from your line, including the pesticide, and getting into the municipal system. So that is definitely one kind of condition where it's basically like back siphonage, where all of a sudden, instead of water going in one direction, it's going in the other direction. And that is where the backflow prevention device is so important, because it stops the flow in reverse. There's flow only in one direction.
So not only do we need the device, it needs to be tested on a regular basis. What should that regular basis be, and how do they test?
So I used to run a food manufacturing company, and I had a backflow prevention device in the facility, and it was mandatory. And this is the other thing, is a lot of municipalities don't have this. So it was mandatory that the backflow prevention device is tested annually. And so it needs to be tested, and someone comes in and makes sure that the valves are all working properly and that flow is just happening in one direction. Occasionally, I think it was year 2 or 3, they came by and said, you need a few parts, and basically came in and replaced the parts so that it was working. But so it was, first of all, that I was required to have this. Secondly, that it was tested and maintained on a regular basis. Now, one of the things that we find is, so there's that initial aspect, there's that interest in having these units in place. But what very often happens, there isn't that mandatory requirement to have the testing done. So I've heard of situations where the device is put in when the building is first constructed, but then someone might come in and go, well, it's kind of hampering the flow of water, probably because it needs to be repaired, and they'll just take it out. Sometimes people don't even know what it's there for. And so unless there is a systematic process there in terms of the installation and the regular checking and testing and maintenance, you may as well not bother. So that's kind of one of the problems, which is kind of why, like, I'll give you an example of a situation. This is going back a few years ago. This is actually in Edmonton, Alberta, where at a research facility, they noticed a smell coming from the water, from the hot water, actually. And then they found out that a growth nutrient for microorganism had backflowed from the laboratory into the facility's domestic hot water system. So that is bad, but that's not as add some other components here where, and this is once again another Canadian example from Ontario, where petrochemicals back siphoned from an industry into the drinking water system. And that impacted 50,000 residents. So, number one, there's a potential of impacting a huge population. The other component is getting that system completely cleaned and running effectively again could take a long time. So we run into situations where I have one more actually. This is going back to Alberta, where a high rise had blue caustic water flowing from the taps. And it was actually as a result of backflow from the heating system after repairs to the internal water lines. The issue took 2 weeks to repair. So in the meantime, you have these people living in this building that cannot drink water, cannot use water safely that's coming from their taps.
Kalpna, what do you want every listener to know, and what's our duty when it comes to backflow prevention?
I think in terms of the general public, I think we need to be a bit more aware. And in a way, maybe we need to pressure our lawmakers that this is really important. That anywhere, like as I said, you could have the best quality water coming from the water treatment facility, but what happens to it between leaving the facility and getting to your tap? That's that part that is often not that rigorously addressed. And so these kinds of things, it's not a huge ticket item. Putting in a backflow prevention, I mean, you think about how much water treatment facilities cost to run and to build and to maintain. This is not a huge ticket item. So really, anywhere where there is a potential of drinking water being impacted because of chemical contamination related to backflow, I think that's something that really needs to be looked into in terms of how do we make sure that there is little to no chance of the drinking water being contaminated. And one of the key areas is with backflow prevention devices. That is essential. But once again, not only just putting them in, but testing them and repairing them and making sure they're effective.
I will let you know that when I purchased this facility about a decade ago, I was thinking of how do we get phones installed? How do we get internet installed? How do we move from the old office to the new office? I never once thought about backflow prevention. And it was about a year later when apparently we were supposed to be receiving notices about testing and they never made it to us. We're thinking they maybe went to the previous owner and got forwarded to them. However, we got a notice that if we did not get something fixed or tested in 5 days, they were cutting off our water. So our municipality is taking that seriously, at least for commercial buildings.
And I think that's what it is. I think there needs to be almost sort of punitive measures with regards to this. Like when I ran the food manufacturing facility, it basically would have been a fine if it hadn't been taken care of. I don't know if there would have been steps in terms of turning off the water, possibly, I'm not sure. But you are putting the public's health at risk without having proper systems in place. And so one of the things that we're trying to do at the Environmental Operator Certification Program is to implement a process by which operators or anyone else can get the training, and then we'll basically do what we do best. We provide the examination and then the certification. And then part of the certification process is I'm really a strong proponent of continuous professional development. So part of that is that anyone going through this program and being certified by us as a backflow prevention tester would need to take 12 hours of training within a 2-year time period to maintain their certification. So that is, it's not just about membership dues. It's not about just getting your certification and then you're set for the next 50 years or whatever it is. You basically do need to have continuous professional development, which needs to be done within every 2-year period to maintain your certification, because I really think that's in the public interest.
The certification you provide, is that good all over Canada?
We're hoping it will be. We will be recognizing other jurisdictions and providing certification via reciprocity. We already have that in place for environmental operators who work across the country. We have people going back and forth, especially between British Columbia and Alberta, and we're hoping to have that implemented with this as well. So this is a new certification that we're launching in mid 2024. We're basically going through the whole process with regards to, we've got the exam in place, and we're the whole PR campaign with regards to rolling it out and letting municipalities know that we have this offering.
Say there's somebody listening and they live in Wisconsin. Where should they go to figure out what the laws are? And then also if there's any certifications that they should be familiar with?
I'd say maybe they should just Google backflow prevention certification. I'm pretty sure that most states have some processes in place for certification.
Kalpna, what do you wish everybody leaves this podcast knowing about backflow prevention?
I would love people to find out about what exactly it is, why it's important, and why lawmakers should be paying more attention to this so that we don't have these incidents of people accidentally, literally being poisoned by their drinking water, because it is completely preventable. That's the thing about it. It is completely preventable, and it's not a big ticket item.
I know you have some resources to help with that. Where should people go to learn more?
Well, if you go to eocp.ca, that's one of the first articles, and the banner is with regards to backflow prevention and cross-connection control. So that, I think, is a pretty good source. It's an article that I researched and I wrote, and I've spoken about this issue as well. So I think that's a good place to start. I mean, not to toot my own horn, but literally you could just Google backflow prevention and, why it's important, and you'll find a wealth of information. The thing about my article is it really talks about the different incidents across North America, because we've got several incidents in different parts of the US as well. And actually, I'll talk about one more. And this is in a town called Woodsboro with paraquat, which is a highly toxic pesticide held in storage tanks, but they had actually connected it to a water supply system. And instead of water going from the supply system into the tanks, there was a backflow, and paraquat was siphoned into the drinking water system. And 63 homes were contaminated.
Wow.
Totally preventable. What's also worrisome about it is that these incidents are likely happening on a regular basis. We just don't know because the severity of the contamination isn't that high. So they could be a little bit coming through, but it's not like the really obvious pink water or foaming water or blue water. So that's also worrisome, is that there could be incidents like this happening all the time that we don't even know about.
As you said at the top of the show, no knowledge ever goes wasted. So hopefully we have educated the entire Scaling Up Nation, and they are now looking for these items. Kalpna, I understand that you are a new member of the board of the Water Environmental Federation. So congratulations on that. And can you tell the Scaling Up Nation a bit about the WEF?
So WEF is just a really fabulous organization, and I just feel so privileged to be part of it as a member of the board. It's one of the largest organizations in the space internationally. And to give you context, I went to the conference in Chicago a few months ago. There were 21,000 delegates, which is quite amazing.
That is amazing.
The work it does is phenomenal in terms of the level of expertise of the staff, of the board directors. And if you want to find out more about being involved as a young professional or, someone who's been working in the industry, there's so many opportunities there. You go to the conference, the next one will be in New Orleans. And some of the components I really like about it is like even just looking at WEF's strategic priorities. I just love their vision, and their vision is a life free of water challenges. What a thing to aspire to. So there's a lot of work in that area, and basically, like when you just like, I really like looking at um, the vision, mission, values of organizations and the strategic priorities. If you look at the information for WEF, it really resonated with me right from the get-go. So I'm really thrilled to be part of this organization.
What is something you want to make sure the listeners know about WEF, and who should get involved?
I think people can get involved at all levels, as a student, as a young professional, people who are seasoned water, wastewater professionals. I think one of the key components, I think that especially now, when you think about climate change and all those components there, is the focus that the Water Environment Federation has with regards to the circular water economy. There's a finite amount of water on this planet, and we really need to spend a bit more time looking at not just water conservation, but water treatment, water reuse. And the circular water economy is something that is a big focus for the Water Environment Federation. But I would really encourage people to have a look at the Water Environment Federation's website. There's a wealth of information there. And then, of course, attend the conference if possible at all, because there's a wide variety of speakers, so many opportunities to learn and opportunities to contribute. And once again, very much in the public interest, the work that's done there.
We will make sure to have that conference on our events page. And who doesn't want to go to New Orleans?
Exactly. And actually, we should make sure that the EOCP's conference is on your page too, because we'd love to have, we did have some people from the US attend in person this year. So that's really great because you know what? No matter where you live, water, wastewater are important.
We are going to make sure to have that on our events page as well. And our team will make sure any information you have, we'll go ahead and get that updated. Well, I've got a few lightning round questions for you if you're ready for those.
Absolutely.
If you could go back in time and talk to your former self as your first day as a CEO, what advice would you give yourself?
I think the advice would be like look at the organization from the 10,000-meter level and look at opportunities. I think that's a really key component. And then also just with that whole aspect with regards to collaboration between different organizations, different individuals in the sector, because at the end of the day, we're all in this together.
I love that. What are the last few books that you've read?
I just finished reading Lessons in Chemistry. It resonated with me also. I mean, it's going back before my time, but a woman chemist and the challenges she faced as a female in the industry. So I thought that was very interesting. A book that really resonates with me that I go back to periodically is a book that was written by one of the professors of a Harvard program I had taken. And it's titled How Will You Measure Your Life? And I find that it's got a lot of business information, but it's got a lot of information with regards to credibility and just different aspects with regards to, looking back on your life and living a life with no regret or few regrets. So I think that that's a book that I sort of almost have it there all the time. And then I try to kind of balance things between fiction and nonfiction. So I bought my son years ago a graphic novel series called Saga. So I'm just rereading those again. It's a little bit on the lighter side. But I also tend to read a fair amount of books related to the water, wastewater industry. And one of the books I read not too long ago is called The Big Necessity, The Unmentionable World of Human Waste and Why It Matters. It sounds like a strange book to read, but it is actually really fascinating because it talks about waste management, or I should say wastewater management on an international level. As it's a bit geeky, but it's really informative too, because it just makes you realize how some things that we totally take for granted in North America are a distant dream in so many other parts of the world.
Without a doubt, they're going to write a movie script about your life. Who do you want playing you?
Oh, it would be so flattering if I had someone because I think she's just absolutely gorgeous, would be like Holly Berry. I think
There you
she's
go.
just amazing.
She'd be lucky to get the part. My last question, if you could talk to anybody throughout history, who would it be with and why?
I was kind of thinking about that, and this can be a bit of a contentious thing for some people because, when it comes to politicians, people hate them or love them. And the two people I thought about, they're both female politicians. One is Indira Gandhi, who was probably one of the world's first female prime ministers. I think she became a prime minister around the same time that the UCP was founded in 1966. And the other one is Golda Meir from Israel, another politician, both very strong women. To some extent, I think about them. I think about someone like my mother, who was also a very amazing role model for me. She, out of most of my, actually all of my friends, my mom was not a stay-at-home mom. She ran a business. So just in terms of that, I've had some amazing female role models in my life, and I'm forever grateful for. They were trailblazers.
Well, Kalpna, thank you for coming on the Scaling Up H2O podcast. We've learned a lot about backflow prevention and different organizations that we should check out, and it's just been a great interview. Thank you so much.
Thank you. My pleasure. I'm so glad that I was selected for this. Appreciate it.
Kalpna, what a delight to have you on the Scaling Up H2O podcast. And Nation, we talked about a lot of resources today in the interview. And I know you are busy servicing accounts and driving to your next account. So don't worry. We have everything that we mentioned on our show notes page. And I was talking to somebody the other day that is an avid listener of the Scaling Up H2O podcast, and they were asking me questions about a particular episode. By the way, I love it when people will say on episode 215, what did you mean about 15 minutes in? And folks, I love you for asking that question. My memory is not that good. So after I kind of laughed and said, I don't remember that show, they told me what I was talking about and what the show was called. And I said, oh, yes, I remember that episode. So we were able to talk about it. And then I mentioned, I'm pretty sure that we did some sort of one-page document to accompany that episode, and they had no idea. And we went to the webpage, and sure enough, we did. And they were able to download that PDF, and it had the answer to their question and all these other resources. So we don't do that for every single episode, but a lot of episodes we do put one-pagers out to help you gain even more information outside of the podcast. But on each and every episode, we list everything that we talk about. If there is a product mentioned or another episode or another website that you need to go to, all of that is on our show notes page. So here is my public service announcement for the Scaling Up Nation. If you have not visited this episode's webpage, you are probably only getting half of the information. Because you can enhance your journey with whatever you're learning about on whatever Scaling Up H2O podcast episode by going to the webpage and then getting all of that wealth, that treasure trove of information where we send you to all different places where you can enhance what you're trying to learn. Folks, if you are looking for Legionella, we have an entire Legionella section. You know, we have had that topic on our program several times, and we've just taken all of that. And the great team here at Scaling Up H2O has created an entire page dedicated to all of our Legionella resources. If we've talked about it, it is up there. So all this to say, for this episode, we talked about a lot of resources. Please make time in your schedule to go to the website and look at some of the things that Kalpna was talking about. They could help you with a conversation with your customer. And who knows, maybe you want to get a particular certification because you learned about it today. And I think that was great advice that Kalpna gave us. Go to Google and figure out what are some certifications that maybe you should actually have and you don't even know about because of the type of water treatment that you do. Why not get it before a government entity says, hey, you're fined because you don't have it? I hope that's not the case. I hope you're just looking on ways that you can enhance what you're currently doing. But Google whatever that is. Maybe after today's episode, you want to get certified in backflow prevention and inspection. Go ahead and search to figure out what is available in your area. And maybe that's a way that you can get into that plant that you just can't get in. You offer another service. There are so many certifications that we are required and expected to know that we are supposed to have as an industrial water treater, but we may not know about it. So that's another reason we brought the hang together. Maybe you might meet somebody in your area and they say, hey, if you're in Georgia, you need a pesticide applicator's license to apply microbicide. Well, folks, that is a fact. And I will tell you, there are many companies that are operating within the state of Georgia that do not have that. So if you're listening to me and you are in my home state of Georgia, be sure to look at that because the Department of Agriculture eventually will come knocking at your door. And you probably won't like the letters that they leave with you. So don't experience that. Google anything you can think of as far as certifications that you might think that you might need. And if there's something out there, go ahead and get it. And now you've got something else that you can add how you are more professional. So thank you, Kalpna, for that advice. And of course, we're going to have everything that she mentioned today on our show notes page. And of course, somebody who helps us each and every week learn new things drop by drop. Here is our friend, James McDonald.
Welcome to Drop by Drop with James, the podcast segment where we wonder, explore, think about, imagine, and learn industrial water treatment. You guessed it, drop by drop. Together. In this week's episode, we're thinking about reverse osmosis. In particular, we are thinking about the dissolved solids and some of the things that influence their passage through the RO membrane. More than simply filtration, reverse osmosis is a diffusion process through a semi-permeable polymer membrane. That sounds fancy, I know, but it can be more than simply size that matters for dissolved solids trying to pass through the RO membrane. One of my go-to books for RO is written by Wes Byrne and is called Reverse Osmosis, A Practical Guide for Industrial Users, 2nd edition. I have not read it cover to cover, but drop by drop as I have questions or needs. It's a good, well-written, practical book that makes a complex subject digestible. Right in the very beginning, it sneaks in some important concepts on pages 8 through 14 in particular that opened my eyes more as I thought about them. First, it talks about the size versus apparent size of atoms and molecules trying to pass through the RO membrane. When you think of sodium and calcium atoms, you probably think of just a single sodium or calcium atom floating around the water solution. However, as we learned in last week's episode of Drop by Drop, we know water molecules are sticky because of hydrogen bonding. Sodium and calcium are charged ions, and they will be surrounded by water molecules hydrogen bonding to them, making an ion group with a larger apparent size. Did you hear that? The apparent size of sodium and calcium ions are bigger than the individual sizes because of the entourage of water molecules attracted to them. Oh yeah! Yeah! This is called ion hydration. The higher the charge of the ion, the greater the number of water molecules attracted to it, and the more difficult it is for it to diffuse through an RO membrane. Now, before I read this part of the book, I had heard that the higher the ionic charge, the higher the percent rejection typically was, but I had never considered the role that water's hydrogen bonding played in that rejection. That's one more reason to love hydrogen bonding. I'm not done yet, however. A second concept this book drove home for me can be found on page 9. It mentions that the water solutions we commonly deal with are neutrally charged, with no charge imbalances overall. Sure, there are positively charged cations and negatively charged anions, but they tend to stay close together, resulting in a net neutral charge. This also means that you will not have a cation passing through an RO membrane unless an anion or anions of equal charge quantity passes through as well. Your pluses must equal your minuses of what passes through. Whoa! Now, not only do dissolved solids have a larger apparent size because of ion hydration, but there's a balancing act of what can pass through an RO membrane based upon their charges as well? Yes! and it is fascinating.
Isn't that amazing?
The example given is of sodium sulfate, or Na2SO4. When it dissolves in water, we will have sodium ions with a +1 charge and sulfate ions with a -2 charge. They'll both be surrounded by water molecules, making their apparent sizes bigger. The sulfate ion with its larger -2 charge will have an even larger apparent size than the sodium ion, so the sulfate ion will have a much harder time getting through the aryl membrane. One would think the sodium ion, with only its +1 charge, might sail on through the membrane, but hold your horses. Because the total charges of what passes through the membrane must balance out. If the sulfate can't go through, then the sodium won't go through either. Now that's loyalty. However, if we add some CaCl2 to the water, things change. Now you have positive calcium ions with a +2 charge and negatively charged chloride ions with their -1 charge. Chloride's -1 charge is smaller than sulfate's -2 charge, so its apparent size will also be smaller, and it will more readily pass through the aryl membrane. Now the charges passing through the membrane will be balanced as both sodium +1 and chloride -1 pass through as calcium and sulfate stay behind. The entire dynamic changed. Man, that's a lot. I hope I made it somewhat understandable and did the topic justice. You might have to rewind to listen again because this water's deep. I've just had these bits of RO information rattling around in my brain for years, and I've seen many aha moments when sharing them with others. I'm James McDonald, and I want to encourage you to be like water by forming bonds with those around you, dissolving new knowledge, and making worthy ripples, drop by drop.
Thank you, James. Nation, next week we are celebrating World Water Day, so tune in as we all celebrate together. Until then, have a great week, and I hope you learn something new. Take care, folks. Scale Up Nation, I believe there are so many potential certified water technologists out there that just have not sat for the examination. And I know that is a daunting thought to sit for that examination. To help with that, I prepared a free CWT course where I outline the entire handbook of everything that you need to know to take and maintain your certified water technologist designation. To get that, go to scalinguph2o.com/CWT prep. Once again, that's scalinguph2o.com/CWT prep. Yes, you heard me right. That is free.